What's up guys, and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today I'm going to be ranking player performances for the 2020-21 season. I'm going to be doing a tier list, and yes, I know I'm about 2 years late to the trend, but they're just a super easy way to visually represent my thoughts, so I thought fuck it, I'm going to do one, and they're fun. If I do sound super nasally in this video, I am getting a bit sick. So if I'm constantly drinking water and I sound like shit, you guys know why, but I wanted to get this video out for you guys. So I'll push through and let's get straight into it. Alright, I've got 6 tiers for this tier list. I've got Player of the Year top. I'm only going to be putting one player in there because, of course, there can only be one Player of the Year. Great. These are players that I thought have had a great season so far. Good, average, disappointing, and didn't play is going to be players who, for me, just didn't get enough minutes to really give them a fair rating. I'm also going to be not taking into account the Champions League final because I feel like that bumps everyone up 1 or 2 tiers and everyone will just be in the top because, of course, winning the biggest competition in club football, you can't really claim that anyone has had a bad season if you win the Champions League. So I'm not going to be taking that into account. So these will be rated on pretty much every game excluding the Champions League final. So as if we hadn't won the Champions League final. I'll start with the goalies, make my way through the squad, and we'll finish up with the strikers. I'll start things off with Caballero. He only played 1 game for us this year, and he conceded 3 goals in that shock loss to West Brom at the beginning of the season. Technically speaking, he deserves to be and didn't play, but he played 1 game, and he was shocking in it, so you could make a case for disappointing. But I'll be fair, and I'll put him in didn't play, because, I mean, 1 game, you can't really play less than that. So didn't play for Willy Caballero. Next, we have Kepa. Now, the thing is, Kepa last year, he would have had his own tier. He would have just had his own Kepa shit tier because he was genuinely that bad. This year, I think he's obviously been far better than he was last year. Still hasn't been great in my opinion. He's just a very average goalkeeper for me. Because expectations were so low for him last year, I don't think he can be disappointing. And I think he's probably the definition of average. He's an average goalkeeper, so average tier for Kepa. Next up is Mendy. Now, this is an interesting one because Mendy, I think if it wasn't for players like Mason Mount, Mendy could genuinely be in for a shout of Player of the Year. Obviously, I said there's only one Player of the Year, but the impact that Mendy has had this season for us compared to last year has just been incredible. The step up from Kepa has been so noticeable. And I think he is in contention for this Player of the Year. But I think we all obviously know who's going to get that. But he is definitely going in great. If I was allowing more people in Player of the Year, if I was allowing Player of the Year nominees in there potentially, he would be up there. But I'm only putting one player up there, and he's been excellent this season. So Mendy's going in great for me. Now moving on to the centre backs. Another new signing this year, Thiago Silva. Signed from PSG on a free. Came in to be that experienced head for us at the back, and you can't tell me that it hasn't worked. Our defense this year has been so much better than it was last year, and I think a lot of that is down to Thiago Silva and his leadership. So for me as well, he's also got to go in great. I think he's been great this season. He's obviously picked up a few injuries throughout, but excluding that, I think he's been excellent all season, except against West Brom. That's his bogey team. But if we remove the injuries and the West Brom games from Thiago Silva, he's been great all season for me. So he's definitely got to go in that tier with Mendy. Next up is Christensen. This is another tough one because before Tuchel came in, Christensen would probably be in didn't play or disappointing for me. He just wasn't getting the game time under Frank, who would pretty much go with Thiago Silva and Kurt Zouma every single game as his centre-back partnership. But since Tuchel has come in, Christensen's resurgence of form has been pretty unexpected, to be honest. I've always been a pretty big fan of Christensen, but even I couldn't see this coming. I don't know if he's played enough games to be in great. If it was just based off the second half of the season, I think this will be the case for quite a few of these players, is if it was based off just the second half of these seasons, they'd be in much higher tiers. But I have to take the entire season into account. So for that reason, I'm going to put Christensen in good. I think it's between good and average, but I think he's been above average since Tuchel came in. So for that reason, I'm going to stick with good. And it's a bit of a reverse for this next player, Kurt Zouma. He was starting game in, game out with Thiago Silva at the back under Lampard. And I think at one point he was our top goal scorer in the Prem. I think he finished with 5 goals, which is still only 2 off Jorginho, who ended up being our top goal scorer. Yeah, as I said, the opposite of Christensen. If this was first half of the season, I would put him in great. But because he hasn't really played much in the second half of the season, and when he has, you can tell that the back three doesn't suit him. He hasn't played anywhere near as well as he did at the beginning of the season. I think Christensen's been better. I don't know if I can put him in good, because if I was to choose throughout the season who's had a better season, I think it would be Christensen. I'll put him in good for now, but he might get moved down. I feel like it's a bit harsh to put him in average, especially right next to Kepa. But I'll keep him in good for now, but he could potentially be moved. I'll reshuffle a few of these guys at the end if I think I need to. Next one is Rudiger. First half of the season, same as Christensen. Couldn't get a game. He was the rotation option. He played all the group games in the Champions League because he was a rotation option. So that might help him a bit with his rating here. Second half of the season, his resurgence in form, similar to Christensen, has been incredible. He's definitely in the form of his Chelsea career, and hopefully he signs a new contract extension. I think he's been better than Christensen, so I'm going to put him in great, although he's another one that could get moved down because he's similar situation. He just didn't play the first half of the season. He looked like he was on his way out before Tuchel came in, so I'll keep him there for now, but he also could get moved down. Tomori, this one, I'm going to be honest, I don't even know why Tomori's in here. He didn't play much for us, even under Frank, before he went on loan, so that's easy. In didn't play. Reece James. I think Reece James has improved a lot from last year for me. Last year, I would have put him in good or average. Obviously, he's very promising. He's super young, but I think he's come on leaps and bounds this year. It's between great or good for me. I don't want to just stock great up. I know he's played well, but I'm going to put him in good, but he would be at the top of good for me. But yeah, I'll go with good for Reece James. Although I think he has been very solid this year, and I would watch out for him next year because he's just been on the rise. Super versatile, played centre back, right back, CDM, right wing back. So I'll keep him in good, although I do think that is a tad bit harsh for Reece. Azpilicueta. Now this one is one that could cause a little bit of controversy. He wasn't the starting right back under Frank Lampard in the first half of the season. That was Reece James, and the second half of the season, he's obviously made his way back into the team, and he's obviously the captain, he's the leader of the team, so it is good to have him in there, but I don't think his performances have been great, personally, especially when he's played at right wing back. I don't think he really has the legs for that anymore. He's still perfectly fine as a right centre back, but I wouldn't say he's been better than any of these guys this season. I think he's just been average. It's not been his best season ever. It's not been a horrible season. So for me, Azpilicueta is in average. I know that one could cause a little bit of controversy, but I don't think he's had an excellent season personally. The next up is Chilwell. Now Chilwell, a little bit of a different story. I think beginning of the season, he was exceptional. Found himself out of the team when Tuchel first came in. He said he wasn't extremely comfortable with the 3 at the back system, playing left wing back. But then he worked his way back into the team, put in some super good performances towards the end of the season, especially in the Champions League final. I know, I said I'm not counting that. But for me, Chilwell's between good and great. Oh, he's been more consistent than Rudiger. He's been consistently good throughout the entire season, except for maybe 5 or 6 games in the middle where Marcos Alonso found himself in the first team. So for me, I'm going to put him in great, because I think at the very beginning of the season, he was actually one of our best players under Lampard. So Chilwell's going to go into great. Emerson didn't play. He didn't really do anything all season except come off the bench at striker against Atletico Madrid and bag a goal with his first touch. And you could make an argument that should bump him up, but he just didn't play enough games. So he's going to go and didn't play. Marcos Alonso. Now, started off the season very poor. In that West Brom game, he had an absolute howler. He was probably at fault for 2 of the games, got pulled at halftime, and then went and had a cry in the bus. He did find himself back in the first 11 under Tuchel. However, I don't think that was particularly deserved. And as Tuchel discussed, he did want to go with a more experienced starting 11. I don't think he earned his position in the team, as I just said. And he definitely didn't do enough to keep his position in the team as Chilwell overtook him. So for me, I'm going to put Marcos Alonso in the first player in disappointing. I know some people probably think he's had an average season. I can see where you're coming from. But for me, he hasn't been great this year. I don't even think he's been average. So he's going to be the first player in disappointing. Next up is the boy Kante. This one, no-brainer. It's between these two. It's same old story though. If the beginning of the season was a bit better for Kante, I 100% think he would have been our player of the year. His form in the second half of the season was second to none. He was probably the best midfielder in the world for the last 6 months or so. I would love to put him in player of the season, but I think we all know who's going to go up there. But he is absolutely at the top of great. Since Tuchel came in, he's been nothing short of exceptional. If he has a good Euros and a good start to next season, I think he's definitely in with a shout for winning the Ballon d'Or, which is kind of crazy to think that a potential Ballon d'Or winner isn't in our player of the year. But I just think that beginning of the season has let him down a tiny bit. So he's top of great, very top of great, edging to player of the season. Next up is Jorginho. Now, beginning of the season under Frank, Jorginho, disappointing for me. I think he was pretty rubbish at the beginning of the season. Then when Tuchel came in and switched the formation, so he was playing in a double six and he wasn't the lone CDM, I think his form really picked up and he was actually looking like one of our best players. And then he tailed off a bit towards the end of the season again. The last 4 or 5 games of the season, he was disappointing. He cost us a few results, I would say, or contributed to a few losses. So for me, I would say Jorginho hasn't been good, hasn't been that disappointing. I think if he hadn't had that resurgence of form under Tuchel, he would definitely be disappointing with Alonso. So for me, Jorginho is going to go in average. And this next one is also going to cause a bit of controversy, I think. Mateo Kovacic, he was our player of the season last year. And I think he's been pretty underwhelming this year. He's not been bad by any stretch of the imagination. But to go from player of the year last year to the performances he's put in this year, he's found himself out of the team a bit, with Jorginho and Kante forming a nice partnership together. And yeah, this one's going to be controversial. Disappointing doesn't necessarily mean they've been bad this year. It just means compared to expectations that we had at the beginning of the season, they've underwhelmed. And for me, that's been Kovacic. To go from player of the year to just having an average season, for me, he's got to go in the disappointing category. He's obviously been better than Alonso as a player, but compared to last year, this season, I would say, has been a disappointment for Mateo Kovacic. Next up is Billy Gilmour. We know just how talented he is, but for me, he just didn't play enough this year. He missed the whole first half, essentially, of the year due to that knee injury that I think he picked up at the tail end of last year. And then when he finally came back into fitness, Tuchel stuck with the more experienced 11, and I think Gilmour only played 2 or 3 games in the Premier League this year. So for me, didn't play. I think he probably needs to look to go out on loan next year to get those first team minutes to continue to aid with his development. I think he's got a very bright future at the club. Injuries and just the strength of the squad just didn't allow him to get enough appearances for me. And now the big one. Obviously, he won our actual player of the season, and I think it would be silly not to put him player of the season. He's been our most consistent performer this season, in my opinion. As I was saying before, most of these players, either bad first half of the season, good second half of the season, bad first half. I don't think there's many players here that you can make the argument that they've been consistently great all year round, except for Mason Mount, who I think has been exceptional all year round. He's definitely kicked on from last year. I think the highest praise that you can give to him is just the sheer amount of hate that he was getting last year has all just completely vanished this year, purely because of his performances that he's put on the pitch. And for me, he's definitely our player of the season, completely deserved. And hopefully he continue to kick on next year, continue his development, and he's got a super bright future at the club. Next up is Kai Havertz, who was our biggest summer signing. Now, beginning of the season, he was just played everywhere. He was played out of position. He played number 8 for most of his games, and when he wasn't playing there, he was either stuck out on the right wing. And then when Tuchel came in, he moved him further forward, which I think is by far his best position. You need to get him closer to goal. His average position when he's playing number 8 was so deep, which is why we didn't see the performances that we saw at Leverkusen from him at the beginning of the season. But since Tuchel's moved him further forward, I think he's been great. This whole second half of the season, I can only think of one bad game he had, and that was Arsenal at the end of the season, but no one particularly played good in that. So second half of the season has been great. First half, obviously, not entirely his fault. He got COVID, moving to a new country. Frank was constantly playing him in different positions, so he couldn't settle. And for that reason, I'm going to put him in good. I think he's had an okay first season. It's good that he's on an upward trajectory going into next season. I think he's going to kick on, and I think people forget just how young he is. He's younger than Mason Mount. He's only 21, so he has got so much time on his hands, and I think he's just going to be a superstar for us next season. So for me, good season. Not great, not bad, but just good, I would say. Hudson-Odoi. Now, this one for me is a bit of a tough one because I'm a huge fan of Hudson-Odoi. I don't think he's put in many bad performances this year. Obviously, he got pulled after like 20 minutes against Southampton, although that was a strange decision for me personally. I didn't think he was that bad, but he just hasn't played that often, and there's got to be a reason for it. His output when he's on the pitch is actually decent, and when he was playing right wing back under Tuchel, when he first came in, I think he was probably our biggest threat, but he just doesn't play enough. Obviously, he's not going to go and didn't play because he's played quite a few games this year, but I don't know what to do with this one. He's so talented and he has so much potential. So you could make an argument that he's been disappointing because he hasn't broken his way into the starting 11 consistently enough. But see, this is tough because I don't think he's been average. He's not been an average player. He's probably just been good, but he hasn't played enough. And I think that the fact that he hasn't solidified his position in the starting 11 would mean this has been a disappointing season for him due to the high expectations we all have for him. So I'm going to put him in disappointing, not based purely off his performances, but just he hasn't played enough and we know how talented he is. So Hudson-Odoi will go in disappointing. That one's potentially a little bit controversial, but hey, it is what it is. Next up is Ziyech. Now, Ziyech was the first signing last year. We signed him just after January, and I don't know about you guys, but I was extremely excited for him. And then it was also equally as disappointing when he got injured in that preseason friendly against Brighton. He came early due to the Eredivisie null and voiding their season, so it wasn't like he didn't have enough time to gel with the squad. He had pretty much a whole preseason. He was training with the squad first before all these other signings. And when he first came into the squad in the 4-3-3 that Frank played, he was looking great. He was looking excellent. He's looking like one of our most dangerous players. I remember him putting in a great performance against Burnley. But then he picked up another injury, if I remember correctly. And that little purple patch of form that we saw under Frank playing off the right in that 4-3-3, we didn't really see that again for the whole season. He did score some big goals for us this season. He scored the goal against Man City in the FA Cup final. He scored a few goals in the knockout stages of the Champions League. I remember one against Atletico Madrid. But in the Premier League especially, I think he has 3 goals and 4 assists or something. And he's come in as one of our more experienced signings. He is 28, so he doesn't have the time on his hands that Ziyech has. And I think he really needed to hit the ground running. And for me, I think this has been a disappointing season for Ziyech. I had such high expectations for him. Obviously, I'm not writing him off yet. There's still next year. It has been a bit of a turbulent year, so he does have reasons for not performing. But I would say this season for Ziyech, for me, has been disappointing. And I think the same can be said for this next player, Pulisic, especially compared to how he ended last season. He was probably one of the most dangerous players in the Premier League after it restarted last year. And I know he picked up that injury in the FA Cup final, which is obviously going to take a while to recover from. Hamstring injuries like that are never good, and they always affect players who are speedy, quick off the mark, more than they do players who don't rely so much on their speed. But I just don't think I can put him anywhere besides disappointing for me this year. He also did score a few important goals. He scored against Real Madrid in the semi-finals of the Champions League. But his output this year, compared to what we expect of him, has been subpar. So Pulisic is going to go in disappointing with Ziyech. I think those two have been pretty similar performance-wise this year. And now another one you're probably expecting to go in disappointing is Timo Werner. But he's not going in disappointing for me. I know he's not been exceptional this year. That is for sure. I'm not going to make that argument. But he's not been as bad as people think. Yes, we all know he can't finish to save his life at the moment. But he's our top contributor in the Premier League. And I think our top contributor overall. And say what you like about his individual performances in some games. But it's impossible to argue that we play better without him in the team. We saw that in the Champions League final. He opened up that space for Kai Havertz. And he's just a constant threat that defenders have to worry about. And he's also come up big in big games. He got the assist for Ziyech in the semi-final of the FA Cup. He scored in the Champions League semi-final. And if he can just find his finishing boots next season, I think he could be deadly. But this year, I'm going to put him in good. I think him and Havertz have had pretty similar seasons. Havertz has definitely shown more flashes of brilliance than Werner. but Werner is just impactful in games. He doesn't look, even if he doesn't look brilliant or elegant, he just manages to impact games with his sheer pace and work rate. So for me, he's been good this year, purely for the fact that our performances with him in the team have been so much better than our performances him without the team. And that links into my point with Giroud. I'm going to put Giroud in average. I know a lot of people are going to think, what are you doing? He scored so many goals for such limited amount of minutes. And yes, I understand that. He's probably our best finisher, definitely our best finisher out of our striking options. But every game he started this season, our overall team performances have been subpar, in my opinion. I know he's had a few outstanding performances. Obviously, the 4 goals against Sevilla in the Champions League stand out. But I think there's a reason that he doesn't play. People are always going on about, why is Giroud not starting? It happened under Lampard as well. Giroud's got to start. Why are Chelsea sleeping on Giroud? But there's a reason he doesn't play, especially under Tuchel. He does not suit the system. He doesn't press hard enough. He doesn't work hard enough. And he has a serious lack of pace. And I actually think this year, his overall play, in terms of bringing the wingers and the wide players into play, has actually been very underwhelming. And he's been more of just a poacher this year than that all-round striker that we know him to be. So for me, I'm going to put him in average. I know a lot of you guys aren't going to like that, but I can't put everyone in great. And in my opinion, he hasn't been that good this year. And lastly, we've got Tammy. Now, you could make an argument didn't play enough for Tammy. In the grand scheme of things, he didn't play enough, in my opinion. I think he definitely should have been our backup striker. I think he should have been playing over Giroud. There's far more upside to giving him game time than an aging Giroud. And he most certainly should have been making the bench for the games under Tuchel. I think that's the only black spot on Tuchel's reign at Chelsea so far, is his misuse of Tammy. I'm going to put Tammy in disappointing, not because I think he's performed badly. I think he was our second top goal scorer still towards the end of the season, but I'm going to put him in disappointing purely for the fact that I think it's been a disappointment to see him not play as much as he did last year. I think he really could have built on from last year, carried on that momentum, but he just hasn't really had the game time, and I don't think that's entirely been his fault. Tuchel might not think he fits the system, which is fair enough, but I think he's more than good enough to be a backup option off the bench at the very least. So I'm going to put him in disappointing. I think it's disappointing for us Chelsea fans to see him out of the team, and I think it's disappointing on a personal level for him to be out of the team. And that's just about everyone. Forget all these guys down here. These are all duplicates. I don't know why there's double of everyone on here, so just ignore all these. I think that's everyone, unless I forgot someone. I hope I didn't forget someone. Now, are there any changes that I want to make to this? Player of the year, I think that's locked in. These 5 have all been great this season. I think good is potentially where I would move someone if I want to. I think you can make an argument that Reece James has been great this year. Christensen's definitely been great second half of the year, but I think the first half of the year, as I said before, lets him down. So I think I'm going to leave all these guys, although Reece James would be the one to move up if I were to move anyone up. Average. Kepa should have his own tier personally. Just shit. He's been rubbish, but compared to last year, he's been average. Azpilicueta is a bit of a controversial one, but he's not been great for me this year. Same as Jorginho and same with Giroud. So I think all 4 of those guys will stay in average. Disappointing. Alonso's been disappointing. Kovacic has been disappointing compared to what we're expecting of him. Hudson-Odoi potentially could be an average. You know what? I'm going to move Hudson-Odoi up to average. He's not played bad, and he's played a decent amount of games. Obviously, he'd want to play more games and earn his starting spot in the starting 11. So I'll move him up to average, but these other 5 are all going to stay in disappointing, and these 4 are no-brainers. They just didn't really play enough minutes. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know any changes you guys would make down below to this tier list. I know these videos always cause a bunch of discussion, so let me know who you would move up and down. And drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to stay up to date with new videos. I'll be dropping new videos once my airways clear and I can actually breathe again. So yeah, subscribe to stay up to date with those videos when I post them, and thanks for watching.